Today is the 6th day of the August 89 7-day retreat in Springwater. There's so many questions or comments that I jotted down a little while ago, or quickly after a meeting, that it's hard to know where to start. Sort of looking at them right now as groups of questions. Maybe the largest group revolving around what is the me? Someone said yesterday, you mentioned the soul, but you never said anything more about it. Is there a soul? Another group of questions brought up in several meetings is about relationship, intimate relationship. What is this attraction between two people that we call falling in love, which so often simultaneously entails falling out of love with someone else? This latter was my own comment. And then there were some questions about the relationship to Toni. After going into it very carefully, intensely in the first talk, on the 6th day, several people mentioning, I do find I like to bring up a question which you will like. And on asking one person, are you yourself interested in this question? The answer was not necessarily. That's very good to come upon, isn't it? Very important. Wanting to entertain Toni. Or, as several people mentioned, I want you to like me. Which has to do with relationship. Wanting someone to like one. Wanting something to be between us. Which we're going to question what that is. So let's see if it will all come together. We don't know. We'll start out with this question, which was the predominant question about me. And people not only asking this because Toni seems to be interested in it, but one is really maybe bothered, nagged by this question. One has looked at it maybe for 10, 15 years, or more recently. Maybe for the first time in this retreat. And something that one takes so much for granted to be real, palpable, existing, is being questioned. That nags one, because our whole identity, what we are, is connected with this question, what we think we are. There's a nagging anxiety that may go with this question. What is this me? And since there is physical feeling accompanying this question, which may be discomforting, unsettling, that may draw one into questioning further, or it may draw one away from it. I don't want to touch this question. It's too threatening. I think, if I remember correctly, one person said, everything was fine in your talks until you brought up that me again. And something happens in me. Pain, anger, resistance. Maybe wanting to fight you over it. Or just anguish. One person, as we were just sitting there, not talking for a while, air conditioner humming, louder than the cicadas, said, right now there is a definite, palpable, physical presence here. Here. Palpable physical presence. And please don't listen to a story. We're looking at things in ourselves as we're talking. Isn't there right now a palpable physical presence? Palpable meaning real sensations in legs, knees, the bottom, maybe tense shoulders, or an ache in the back, or there is the heart pounding, or maybe very quietly, barely perceptibly beating. There's a breath, maybe a deep breath, or very shallow. One may feel circulation of blood or energy, whatever it is, something tingling throughout the body. And, I forgot one thing that this person said. And a definite identification with this palpable physical presence. That's what he said. An identification with it. And what is that identification? Was our first question. We are identified, aren't we, as we're sitting here with this palpable physical presence. The sensations of it. And there is a body image. Body, thought, and image. Of this body, how we sit, maybe how we look, maybe we remember what we're wearing. I've recently read a book by I don't know what the specialty of that part of medicine is called, a brain specialist, neurologist, who describes different weird cases. The book is entitled "The Man Who Took His Wife to Be a Hat." And it's not a funny title, it happened. Man mistook his wife for the hat. She was in the room too, but he addressed himself to the hat. But in this book there is one case story we may do this even if we're not brain damaged. And vice versa. It's not just the men's fault. One case story which I have a hard time remembering things. I wish I did. It could make a very vivid thing here to describe. I forgot it. All I know is this woman did not have a body image. It was lacking. It was brain damage. And there were severe physical, emotional problems, emotional and also relationship problems, which I also forgot. But a severe case. A person who had no body image. This hand didn't belong to a whole. So not to disparage the body image is there, and it may be more or less accurate. Let me say something before going on. I hope I will remember where to continue. In connection with talking about the me, people tell me that as they listen to a talk on the me, or when the me crops up in a talk, that there so quickly goes this feeling of, I shouldn't have that. That's bad. To have a me, to be identified with whatever we're all identified with. And is it the intensity with which I speak that causes one to hear condemnation in that? It's not meant to be. But maybe we have never been able to listen other than with categorizing immediately as right or wrong, good or bad. And to pay attention to that as we're listening. Is there in the listening immediately a condemnation or acceptance or whatever all of our reactions are? That affects the listening. And one may project that condemnation on the one who is talking, as though she was condemning. It is so clear that whatever we condemn or think is wrong or bad, immoral, cannot be accurately, expansively looked at. Something narrows down or closes up or distorts the looking or the listening, or the perception, if there's condemnation. So, in whatever we're talking about this morning, and even with great emphasis or intensity, that does not imply acceptance or rejection. So back to the body image, which is a function of the brain, to have that, to produce that. For our integrated functioning, physically, in many ways. I forgot all what he wrote about. Is that the identification that we refer to when we say, I feel identified with this physical presence here? Having a body image? Or is there the thought the words talking to oneself, about oneself. This is me. We say, this is me, sitting here. And isn't that slightly more than a body image that is produced in the brain about this integrated physical organism, or integrally functioning if it is healthy physical organism, to say, this is me. And this statement that we make to ourselves about ourselves does not just include this physical organism. It includes all that we talked about yesterday, all of our memories of what we have been and recall, all of our talents, capacities, achievements or failures, relationships, and what we project into the future as our continued life, as me. And not just the identification with all of these memories, how one looks, how one thinks one looks. One may be a handsome or beautiful person and have the image that one is ugly, not handsome, not attractive. And vice versa. The identification with all of that, saying all of that is me, is not all. It's not all about this me, this meanness, this selfness. There is attachment to it. A deep-seated, long-standing attachment to being me, good or bad, success or failure. Attachment to what I know about myself, like about myself, or dislike about myself, which has, to a large extent, come through how other people have told me I affect them, or other people have told me what I am. Just having spent 2 weeks very recently with 2 little children, our grandchildren, 3 and Ben 8. It's mind-boggling what they're told they are in the course of one day, good and bad. And the little girl right now, 80, not just by her parents, wherever she goes almost, people say, isn't she cute? How cute she is. And she hears that. She hears that very well. And one can see the effect of that, the little production she's developing to attract even more attention to herself. Of course, she's the dearest when she's not aware of that and really acts out of being interested in something. Not what someone else says to her she is, but being genuinely into something. Then the face is different. Than when she's trying to produce affection or attention in others. She's a very affectionate little girl, very affectionate. She loves to climb onto one's lap and cradle in there as though Lap and Adi were created for each other. There's no gap there. I think I mentioned on the first day her just saying that word, Grandma, and savoring, hearing the word, looking for an effect, but also as though somewhere there is a wondering about the name, the word, and this person sort of belonging together. One can sense that. She will also sometimes say, Grandma, what's your name? And repeat it, ask it again. Because when she asks me, what's your name, I say Toni. Maybe she has heard that. Of course she has heard that. When other people talk to me. And there's something maybe amazing about it all. So she asks it and then she listens. And she smiles as all of this goes on. And then maybe Ben will come up and talk to me. Imagine Ben, 8 years old now, he used to be the apple of my eye. He also fitted into this lap. He still does. But he's 8 years, he's getting lanky, new teeth. And a little bit embarrassed initially about physical contact, but if he sort of feels no one is looking and thinks it's strange, and he just loves to cuddle just as much. But here he comes up, and I talk with him because he's talking with me. And Adi will stretch her hands out, take a hold of my face, and turn it away from Ben onto herself. Nicely in the beginning and increasingly obnoxiously. And then at a propitious time, Ben will grab her lion. She brought Bumbalion. I don't know if people know Bumbalion. There are new creatures on the market every Christmas. It's a lion with sort of a bumblebee breast. Fits into Adi's arm, almost as big as her. It was so sweet seeing her come down that passageway of the airport with Bumbalion in her arm, the tail sticking out with a pink tassel. So Ben will grab Bumbalion and run away with it. Adi screaming, running after him to get Bumbalion back. And Ben is not going to give Bumbalion back to her. He's holding Bumbalion, and she's not going to get him. And then mother or father interferes, or how you say, there's another word, steps in, saying to big brother, don't torture your little sister. You're torturing her. I asked him that once, whether he liked to torture his little sister, and his eyes lit up. And he said, yes. So, it's not just a little child's scene, this wanting to be held and be the special one of the one who is looking at her and trying to forcefully turn the head away from someone else so that the sun will shine upon me, not upon someone else, and feelings of jealousy, anger, activity, fighting activity arising when she can't get that. We're these little children, aren't we? The marvelous, blissful feeling when someone pays attention to us completely, with loving eyes, looks at us, holding us, taking care of us, talking to us nicely, friendly. We want that to continue forever, don't we? And we hope by entering into a relationship that which may have taken place in the beginning will continue forever. And very likely it won't. It may. I don't know. But the other complication is that the person, here, a grandma holding a little child, I don't want to be held by 80, although there's a mutuality in that. But I don't expect her. I don't expect of her. I don't think I do. When she climbs up, it's a marvelous thing, but when she doesn't want to climb up, or climbs up onto her mother's lap or daddy's, I don't feel jealous. I don't want anything of her. But as we meet each other in this relationship that we call falling in love, both of us want maybe the same thing of the other. And maybe one is more into receiving than into giving. Maybe the other one is also more into receiving than giving. Maybe both of them. How is this equation going to work out? Each one will think the other is not sufficiently caring of me or interested in me. So part of the feeling of the goodness of me, of the aliveness, the happiness of me is being looked upon and held, touched, lovingly, gently, exclusively, as someone special. Someone mentioned just that in the meeting. I realize I want to be somebody special. That's a big part of this feeling of me, wanting to be special. Of course, this wanting to be special can only be in relationship to someone else, unless one creates in one's imagination one's own audience for one's specialness, which we are also very good at. If we don't have the real audience who thinks we are special and gives us adoring or admiring looks, then the imagination can create that. And already little children who maybe don't get enough attention from their parents create these companions in imagination very early and live with them, talk with them, play with them. As long as things work the way our needs go, the way our needs demand, things flow all right for the me. But very often, they don't. We don't get what we need or demand because other people are just as needy and demanding. So then, is there hurt, feeling of being neglected, abandoned, unloved, because our feeling of being lovable is dependent on someone else giving us that attention, that loving attention. And if our feeling about ourselves being worthwhile, or this life being worth living, if that depends on someone else doing this for us, then we're hooked, for better or worse. If we get it, it's fine. If it diminishes or peters out or ceases, we're in misery, in despair. Life feels not worth living. And all kind of emotions arise, like anger, hatred, of the person who withholds or gives to someone else what came to us, on which we lived. This was our existence, our nourishment for feeling good about ourselves and about our life. We're not condemning, we're not saying it shouldn't be so. We're looking at it. And can one look for oneself at all of that? So one becomes wise, intelligent, about this whole feeling of me and you, the attachment to it, and how we set ourselves up for pain and disappointment. Feeling of loss, loneliness. One person put that in a very interesting way, a person who told me she had just lost a person with whom she had lived for several years, very closely, very intimately and happily. Not lost by death. They parted. And she said, it is as though part of my history has been wrenched out of me. We make history together, don't we? And we cling to that remembered history. Maybe the person said that too. Sometimes the memory is more pleasant even than the actual was. We make history alone and with our lover, companion, husband, wife, and attach to that history and want that to continue. If it doesn't, then it feels just like this person described, something wrenched out of me, which seemed to be such an essential part of me, to which I was attached and on which I depended for my well-being. So the question comes up, doesn't it, right now? Can one be together, relate to each other intimately or otherwise, without demand? In a new way. It's so hard to describe. In a new way, which is not based on needing to nourish the sense of me, of specialness. of being lovedness, which is on a different basis. Touching each other on a different level altogether. It's a question. It doesn't condemn the other that was said before. One person said earlier in the retreat, I have a feeling that there can be another state than the one I constantly find myself in. Totally encumbered by thoughts, problems, and trying to think out the problems through thinking. There can be, there must be, there is another state. But I don't know how to get there. I don't know how to attain it. And thought can only imagine something, but that's more of the same image, imagination, based on the past, projected into the future. I'm not sermonizing. Sometimes people say, when you say that, I just tune out. But why can't one look at that? Because I'm not talking abstractly, I'm looking at thinking about another state that I would like to attain. But whatever thought imagines is imagination. And that's not a new state. We live in imagination most of the time. Fantasy, reverie, daydreaming, thinking back on what was, thinking what our future will be like. And enmeshed and entangled in the story of our life with great attachment. This person also said, the one who said there must be another state, also said, I have seen the limits of thought. It's quite clear to me the limitation of thought. I've seen that, I've looked at it. It's clear to me that thought, the limitation of thought, how limited it is. If that is really seen to be so, to be a truth, then is it also realized that thought cannot produce that other state, no matter how hard it tries, through practices which we talked amply about in the beginning. Because practice is initiated by the thought of attaining the other state. And thought is enmeshed in the practice. So what will one do, realizing that thought is limited and yet wondering about another state in which thought does not predominate, does not outline or inline everything in our life? One doesn't know what to do, does one? One can't know what to do. Will one verbalize that state immediately to oneself of, I don't know what to do, I can't do a thing, and then maybe concluding I have to give up? Or will one not fall into the trap of verbalizing the state of not knowing, just not know what to do? The brain wants to say, now you don't know what to do. And then we react to that emotionally. So not to be trapped by that, even if the brain says you don't know what to do. You're helpless. There isn't any way. Let the brain say that, let thought say that. And leave it there, and still wonder. About what? About one knows not what. Just wonder, meaning not knowing. This is not a passive state, nor is it an active state. It has nothing to do with passivity or activity. It's just wondering, not knowing. And when thought suggests something to realize, that's thought, and it's limited. And whatever else may come up, emotion, feeling, sensation, the cicadas, we call them cicadas, but the sound is not the word. Can that be touched, whatever comes up, without the separation of knowing it? Without the separation of doing something about it? Wondering what it is. Already having once neglected to come back to the soul, we'll talk about it. There's some time left. The person who brought up the soul this time, the first time, was someone else. If you will recall, in saying, the person himself wondered, what is the me? And in asking, well, what is your response to that? What is the me? What will you say that the me is? He said, it's wanting to continue. It's wanting to be happy. He didn't list it like this. He was looking. Wanting to continue. Wanting to be happy. And having a soul. He also said, dying with courage. So someone else mentioned, and again I don't remember verbatim what was said, but the essence of it was, I do like to believe that there is a soul within me, something which will continue after death. And I do like the whole idea of reincarnation. Soul being reborn in another life. And in that way of being reborn again and again in different circumstances, developing more fully, growing. And then asking, why do you want to believe that? What is the attraction of that belief? One of the things that was said was seeing all the unspeakable misery about one, into which people are born, in which they are raised. Horribly painful or abusive childhoods, and myself never having experienced anything of that. What the people that I get in contact with have gone through or are going through right now. The whole idea of reincarnation gives an explanation for this existence of great misery, great deprivation, great suffering, and then other people not suffering, not living under great deprivation, and so forth. I think we're in for a huge topic. In India, where this belief in reincarnation is predominant, a predominant belief, the whole caste system starting with the untouchables to the Brahmana, and all the good fortune or ill fortune that people find themselves in is explained that way. And friends who have traveled in India or lived in India for varying lengths of time have reported that because of this predominance of this idea, there is great indifference in India to human suffering. One man who was sent to India to build a factory, a chemical factory that he had been working here in this country, he was appalled as the factory was beginning to run. The indifference to safety or injury to the workers. He himself, many a time, put an injured or a diseased worker into the back of his car and drove him to the hospital. He said no one else would have done it. Is that due to believing that this is karma, where we are? Karma will take care of it. When he's reborn, he will have paid off something, have gained some merit. And what about ourselves, finding ourselves in fortunate circumstances? What does that thought do to us? If we think that way, I must have done pretty well in my previous lives to be so fortunate right now. And there can come up a real pride and self-satisfaction. That's one aspect of this whole explaining the obvious inequality and injustice that exists in this world. And what we were talking about is, can one start out with acknowledging that? Acknowledging the plain fact that there is indescribable injustice in this world. Inequality. Going on right now, and having gone on since time immemorial. Someone born to be a chief and someone born to be a slave. Not born to be, but it turned out this way. Someone born with great faculties and capacities, health, good looks, and someone sickly, no capacities, or neglected capacities. All the different circumstances we find ourselves in is a fact. Let's first acknowledge it, look at it, and look at it beyond the surface, because someone living very poorly with no possessions, maybe only one meal a day, may have some joy that someone else living in great affluence with lots of possessions does not have. Maybe the person living affluently is more miserable than the one living in poverty. People who have been in countries like that have told me things to that effect. A can be an amazing joy in dancing and drumming among very undernourished people in India. Maybe because they don't worry where their next meal comes from, they can't worry about it, they don't know. It's clear, it may be there or may not be there. So one has to be careful not to project one's own feelings, emotions, sentiments, and ideas upon a situation before really contacting it intimately, living there with the people for quite a while, which most of us can't do. But what about the soul that is within us, or that we believe or want to believe is there? Come to us from a previous life and surviving this body. Do we believe in that because it is a very comforting idea? Because one of our greatest fears is the fear of dying, fear of ending, of not being anymore when this physical body ends, of there being nothing left of the story of me. We dread that. The person who was talking about the feeling of me, that was the first thing he said, I want to continue. And we all know this feeling, even when it doesn't concern our own life, when we become very immersed. Maybe I've talked about it in a talk. Very immersed in a novel or a movie, very identified with the characters. We don't want that to end. We want it to continue. The excitement of it, the pleasure of it. The aliveness of it, because we're involved, because we're identified. And when it ends, it's like this person said, something is torn out of me, some history, some essential part of me, or which I thought was an essential part of me. So is that why we believe in a soul? So we don't have to face our own ending, the ending not just of this physical body, but of the story of my life. We don't have to face that if we believe it will continue. And our belief, our imagination is free to believe that it certainly will be an even better life than this one. We would not cherish to believe that we will be born into utter misery. And in believing in and creating through that belief the comfort, does that enable us to face what is going on right now in our life? Or does that insulate us against facing pain, anger, fear, jealousy, or envy? Dealing with all of that can be postponed until another life. But if it is postponed, it is this very misery of fear, anguish, anger, division, which will continue in the next life. It has continued. We can just look at history. Human misery has continued. Century upon century. Can it come to an end in oneself, not in another life, but now. Without imagining any ideal state for the future, but asking this question now. And to find out, we have to face anger and fear. What is it? Or, if that belief in the soul is so strong, what is it? If I believed in the soul, I think I would want to come face to face with it. See it for myself, not just believe it. Be in touch with it. Find out what it is. Why should one believe anything? The one who proclaims it, how does he know? She's also believing. Or if he or she who proclaims it, or the one who wrote the book that proclaims it, came upon something that is a soul, a real soul, then I can come upon it too. So will one begin to look for this soul, this me entity? Has such strong belief in it and such attachment to it. Try to find it, look for it. Not think about it. You can think about it, but that's not looking for it. And we may find the more we look, not imagine something. We realize imagination is limited. The more we look for it, we may find the less there is to see. When the imagination doesn't play, what is there to see in us? When the images are seen for what they are, images. But that's not a soul. Soul is not an image. Someone believing in a soul would not take an image for the soul. But when there are no images and no thoughts, then what is there? There may be frustration, the feelings, the sensations, and thought feeding that, or for thought issuing from it. And as that is seen and melts away, what is left? Can one find out? This finding out, this looking, this researching, as it were, involves, does it not, dying to the story about me and my soul. Dying to the attachment to that. And listening freely without that. Is that possible? we will end here for today.